Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Broto Fantasy Football Podcast presented by BrotoFantasy.com and the Fantasy Football by Broto app, the only tool you need to dominate fantasy football.
Like, share, subscribe, download that ish. You already know what it is. It's week 9, crunch time. I'm your host with the most. Get your league mate smoked at PsychWardFF. Follow me on Twitter. Follow all the boys at Broto Fantasy. We out here, man. And as always, we're going to answer all your questions on Crunch Time Live. Get everyone started, sit in, get all your questions in so we can pop these things off before the 1 or 2 o'clock hour. I'm on the Atlantic time, so 1 o'clock hour. Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming in. We already got a few comments, but before we do, I'm here kicking it by myself. We may have a surprise guest popping in later. Keep that on the DL, but tell all your friends also to come in, join the chat. We got our regular guest in here, Tom Brady. Stan, #GOAT, guess who, bright and early morning. What's up, brother? Good to have you. He has a wide receiver dilemma. Chris Godwin or Michael Pittman Jr. in the flex. Who do we like? I mean, I've actually been a big proprietor of Godwin not being as good as people assume. Maybe I should readjust that statement because obviously he's been balling out a little bit over the past few weeks. In all honesty, I think Josh Downs and Gardner Minshew kind of have built a rapport that is undeniable. Yeah, Michael Pittman kind of saw that lead share in targets again, but a little bit under his averages and yardage totals and receptions. Getting that touchdown certainly helps him out there. But I think that target share is going to be a little bit limited to what we saw with those 8 targets and 8 receptions through 6 games straight over the first 6 weeks. I do kind of lean Godwin here, but it's very close, obviously. Otherwise, you wouldn't be asking. Godwin's going to be my slight lean for Tampa Bay, but I still like Michael Pittman Jr. here. I think it's going to be very similar scoring ceilings as well, but I do think with how the ADOT has kind of decreased in Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield, finding Godwin to be his security blanket, so to speak. I obviously think that he's a must-start player, especially heading into this matchup. Michael Pittman, though, don't sleep on him. Hopefully, you might even have another, avenue in which you can get Michael Pittman in there because I don't think that he should necessarily be downgraded. Coming up to your next question, my boy. Also, running back options are limited. You think I'll be all right if I start Darrell Henderson and Cooper Kupp? Yeah, actually, Darrell Henderson is coming in as one of the Broto fantasy sleepers this week. We're feeling pretty good about Darrell Henderson overall. I think, there's a short yardage split that's going to happen with Royce Freeman, but Freeman's yet to be targeted. Henderson actually getting some targets in the passing game, things of that nature. So I do think that there's a good avenue for Henderson to be started in your leagues this week. Obviously, you can't bench Cooper Kupp. Yeah, the downside has come 2 back-to-back games under 30 yards, the first time in his entire career, even before he broke out as the superstar Cooper Kupp, that has even happened. So obviously, you have to feel a little bit worried about that, especially with Brett Rypien expected to start. You're going to downgrade the entire offense there. But I still think Darrell Henderson, as a backup quarterback coming in, probably has an increased target ceiling here. And you can't, you have to feel not as great on Cooper Kupp as you had throughout the years and throughout the, start of the season when he first came back with Puka. But you're still starting him, in my opinion. And I think you're going to see, with the way that the ADOTs have worked out and their route trees have worked out, that Cooper Kupp may be utilized a little bit more underneath and, Puka being more limited with Rypien under center than Kupp. Alejandro in here saying, let's have a great day, boys. Let's have a great Sunday. Week 9. We know we got to get at it. Yo, from BVic22. Happy week 9, everyone. This is not a crunch time question. Well, all questions are crunch time questions. We're on crunch time. It's a question. But how do we feel about Debo rest of the season? I mean, I've been a big proprietor of Brandon Ayuk since he came into the league, even in that rookie season when he finished as the wide receiver 12 overall. I think wide receiver 16 in points per game. I genuinely think that Brandon Ayuk is a top 12 wide receiver in the NFL, top 10 if you're really pushing me on the right day. I think Debo's limitations obviously come within his health and within that scheme. Like healthy Christian McCaffrey kind of limits his need to be a runner when you also have guys like Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell that can get it done, can help change the pace up when McCaffrey needs a little bit of a breather. Then you have Brandon Ayuk, who has a much more extensive route tree, can work underneath, over the top, in intermediate situations, over the middle, on the outside, whereas Debo is obviously classically used inside of the slot and on short yard situations where there's a lot of open space for him to work after the catch. I don't think that Deebo Samuel is ever going to put up another fantasy season or even really another fantasy week in the breakout season that we saw when he was playing that running back wide receiver hybrid role. I do think that Brock Purdy has also kind of, health is certainly a concern. Like if you are buying into that concussion narrative, and I certainly am, because he's looked downgraded, but also defenses, it's kind of like you actually have a full season of sample size, like 17 games, right? And teams have seemingly kind of started to figure that out. The timing isn't as precise as it was, obviously. And I think Ayuk is the guy that's going to continue to see the majority of targets. Deebo, obviously, still a guy that you have to hold on to, but in my opinion, downgrades to more of a low-end wide receiver 2 and even flex play for the rest of the season. Big Will, my boy, always in here, always showing the love, and I appreciate that so much, brother. Good morning to you as well. Charles Kearney, another regular. Much love, much respect. Good to see you in here, bro. Who we flexing this week? Quentin Johnson, Algier, or Hunter Henry? I'm losing. Who is the Hunter? The second Hunter. Getting crushed by bye weeks, he says. I saw Henry as a sleeper this week. Appreciate you for tuning in. Also saw Komet as a bust, so not sure what to do now. Half PPR. I'm in that flex spot. Unless it's tight end premium, I'm still kind of like not a big proprietor of starting a tight end over, starting multiple tight ends in positions that you don't need to. With Josh Palmer out and QJ kind of seeing a little bit more of an increased role last week, hopefully they continue to bring that ADOT down and actually get him some looks where he can work after the catch as well. I think he might have a higher ceiling than Algier. Algier's kind of starting to turn into like, he's a very safe floor. You're going to get 7.5 PPR points, but there's not much of a ceiling there. And Bijan continuing to see more and more work as the season carries on. Hunter Henry, I really like in that tight end streaming spot, that high upside sleeper, so to speak, as we've talked about. And, tune in, everybody that's listening to the Sleeper Bust article where I mentioned, obviously the Patriots' need for pass catchers right now, calling up Kayshon Boutte, Demario Douglas hopping to the top of the depth chart with Kendrick Bourne being injured for the rest of the season. Unfortunate for Bourne as he was having a career year, of course. But Hunter Henry, even though the Commanders are a stingy matchup against tight ends, increased percentage in routes run and how much offensive production that the Commanders give up to wide receivers and over the middle, I feel pretty good about Henry this week. I do think that Quentin Johnson is the guy that I'm going to flex here. I think the ceiling might be there in a good matchup, and we kind of saw a little bit of what we can expect from QJ if they continue to target him more than once or twice a game, which is really the problem. Like, I think targets are earned both in the routes you run via separation and on the whiteboard, in the film room, so to speak. And they just weren't really drawing up plays for Quentin Johnson where he was the first or second read. You saw a little bit of that last week, obviously, with Josh Palmer going out. And I think you could continue to see a little bit of that again. With that said, though, tamper expectations on the guy, but he's not necessarily someone that I'm, feeling like I should start Hunter Henry over him, or Tyler Algier for that matter. That helps me out, putting Hunter Henry twice. Okay, well, cool. At least I didn't leave anyone off that list. Much love, brother. Hope that helped. Charbonnet or Roschon Johnson this week. Ooh. That's a tough one. That's a tough low-end flex there. I think I'm going to lean a little bit more Roschon. Obviously, we didn't see it last week. We do have a healthy Kenneth Walker, like Charbonnet kind of increasing a little bit of that work, but I think game script played more into that than anything. Roschon Johnson should start to work ahead of Deontay Foreman for as long as Khalil Herbert is injured. I think Darrington Evans kind of sneaking into the end zone is keeping that narrative a little bit suppressed, where obviously Deontay, with Roschon still in concussion protocol, had a monstrous workload, immediately suppressed once he returned. Could probably see a little bit of a bigger uptick there as well, continuing into this week with Tyson Bagent still under center. With that said, Charbonnet to me really needs an injury or to fall into the end zone to see relevance in any fantasy week. I think there's a little bit more upside with Roschon Johnson here. I could be completely wrong. I'll concede that, because this is really those low-end flex plays, and I know how important those 8-9 points can be in any given week. Trust me, especially now we're getting towards the crunch time of the crunch time in the end of the season. Obviously, week 9, all of these wins matter. Every game matters. We got playoffs 5-6 weeks away, depending on your league formats. So I'm leaning Roschon Johnson here. I might come back to this one, Big Will, so stick in. If I have a little bit of a change of heart or as I scroll through my notes and stuff and kind of feel a different way, I'll obviously retro and give you some more advice there. But right now, leaning towards Roschon Johnson in that half PPR format. You said, appreciate you tuning in, brother. Yeah, I mean, big Debo fan, big 49ers offense fan, but obviously I think Ayuk kind of outweighs that outlook for the rest of the season. Steve Breaky in here, half PPR. He wants to start three. I was reading ahead a little bit. Pop Douglas, that's Demario Douglas for the Patriots for the uninformed. Gerald Everett, Rashid Shaheed, Tyler Algier, or Jamison Crowder, who had a monstrous game with one of the most beautiful touchdown catches I've seen in Jamison Crowder's career last week. With that said, I think, Pop Douglas, it's going to be underneath. It's going to be a lot of low depth. Like even in his highest reception game, you're talking about under 50 yards still. Gerald Everett, a little banged up. I think Rashid Shaheed's the play there if you're looking for ceiling. If you are looking for safety, then Pop Douglas potentially. I'm not necessarily leaning him over Algier, but you're going to get a pretty good half PPR outlook from Douglas. I do think you can get at least, 7 points in that, 7.5, 8 points in that, which is where I have Algier projected as well this week, if you were listening. But the ceiling obviously relies on Rashid Shaheed. And I will, it is worth noting that he only played 26% of snaps, had 3 targets, turned all 3 of those targets into over 120 yards with a touchdown. A little bit of like a poor man's Randy Moss Thanksgiving Day outing for Rashid Shaheed. But with him being as lethal as a big play threat as he is, and Carr and Chris Olave clearly having a little bit of a dysfunctional relationship, at least as far as the cameras have picked up. And as we've seen on the sidelines with those two arguing, and Olave's role kind of fluctuating throughout the season with his target totals and his overall production certainly dissipating, as it was such a great floor and ceiling throughout the first 4 weeks. I think I'm going to lean Rashid Shaheed here. It's certainly a bigger ceiling than any of these other guys offer. So I'm usually a ceiling play guy, and I think I'm going to continue to lean the ceiling. But if you're looking for absolute safety, it's going to go Pop Douglas, Algier, Crowder, Everett for me. Smitty up in here. Good morning, brother. Have a doozy at QB this week. Heineke, Bryce Young, or Daniel Jones. I mean, I have to bring it up, man. I have Heineke as my high upside sleeper at quarterback this week, and there's a few different narratives. Obviously, like it's not the best matchup on paper, but I certainly think it's a good enough one to warrant a start for Taylor Heineke. It's going to be, the Falcons passing offense has to not just improve efficiently, it really has to change as a philosophy with Arthur Smith. It's not just his increase in passing volume, which we have seen from years past, right? They are above the 32 pass attempts per game, which you obviously want to see with any fantasy relevant offense, but it's the plays that he's running, like having Kyle Pitts play fullback while Jonnu Smith takes an end around sweep and passes to McCole Pruitt in the end zone. Arthur Smith is as incompetent as a play caller and play designer as I've ever seen in my history of watching football. So it has to be a complete offensive change. With that, I do kind of like Heineke over Bryce Young, who's only had one QB1 finish this season, still struggling as a rookie, and that's fine. Bryce looks capable, competent, but the fantasy production isn't there. I think once the Panthers finally get a wide receiver room that will be able to support a younger quarterback, then we're going to see a bit more production for Bryce Young. Until then, you're going to be fluctuating in between these weeks of low end and 1 or 2 QB finishes throughout the season. Taylor Heineke, though, he brings an undoubted spark to a meandering squad and a serviceable streaming option throughout his NFL tenure as well. He draws a plus matchup in his first start as the Falcons host the Vikings in Week 9. The over, under, and spread isn't necessarily what you want for a positive game script. Jaron Hall coming in to replace the injured Kirk Cousins, but Vegas betting lines do have the over, under at 37.5. A less than ideal predictive game script again, but with that said, Heineke faces the best matchup of any readily available streamer this week. Vikings allow 221 passing yards per game. That's 16th below league average, 20.3 points per game, 16th below league average. And they concede 19.4 points per game. That's 9th overall to opposing quarterbacks. He may not provide top 5 positional production, but I think he's a plug and play option, and certainly the guy that I favor over these two. Daniel Jones has just been absolutely horrendous. Coming into your second question in this section, Steve, half PPR, Singletary or Darrell Henderson. Even with Brett Rypien in, I think I'm kind of leaning Darrell Henderson a little bit here. Once again, hopefully you were listening earlier, one of our high upside sleepers for the week. I do think Darrell Henderson, he's just got a little bit of a nice catch floor. Singletary is going to work in with Dameon Pierce, obviously, I think Dameon Pierce is in a favorable matchup, a guy that I kind of like above consensus this week, and I'm not a Dameon Pierce truther whatsoever. I don't necessarily think that the Texans are going to get away with that game, so to speak, have a massive lead enough for Devin Singletary to get those garbage time looks, to get additional looks in the passing game as well. So leaning Darrell Henderson here, but in my projections, it would be like I have Darrell Henderson as a low end RB2, that RB24, and Singletary just outside of that range. Kind of any of those guys outside of that range to fall into the end zone, obviously going to boost them up. And that's what you need from Singletary. I don't think the small, 1.5 average targets with 22 receiving yards and his 48 rushing yards per game is necessarily enough to boast him over a guy that has a path to an increased work share. Smitty back in here immediately after with also Myers and Puka in my flex spot. Ripien has me scared. I also have Kupp. Would you start Darrell Henderson over either of them in PPR? Probably not. And I'm glad that these questions kind of bleed into one another. Probably not. I do have Darrell Henderson boosted this week. Boosted above consensus? Yes, absolutely. So if your gut says go with it, if you're that worried, I'm not going to stop you. But I do still think that Puka needs to be the guy that started. I also think that Myers needs to be the guy that started with Aiden O'Connell under center. Obviously, you're looking at two horrendously bad quarterback situations here with Myers, Puka, Kupp. But these are guys that you have to start until the wheels fall off. And I don't think that, the first start for Aiden O'Connell, well, I guess actually the second start, mind you, in the first start of Brett Ripien's season this year, it's a downgrade situation, absolutely. But these players are guys like they have to see targets, and they've proven to produce with those targets, regardless of who's under center. It's absolutely a lower value of target. Yes, you downgrade them from wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 1s to flex plays, but they're still guys that should be in your flex spot, and that's where you have them. If you're relying on them for your wide receiver 1 production, your wide receiver 2 production, that's going to create a little bit more panic, absolutely. But there's very few players that are on that waiver wire level that you would have picked up, or guys that you've been stashing for injuries, on your roster, that you're going to feel confident starting over these guys, because you're guaranteed at least a target ceiling and players that will see work. Otherwise, you're just relying on unpredictable production, and blow-up games can happen from any player in the NFL. That's why they're pros. But Myers and Puka are guys that I can't bench, even with their quarterback downgrades, especially when it's just considering that I'm in my flex spot. Hopefully, you do have some high-end production to carry you through the week at those wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 spots. But as it goes right now, yeah, you still have to start those guys. And if you do have pivots, let me know. Post them in the chat, and we'll get to them for sure. Alejandro in here, start 2 full PPR. Pop Douglas, Demario Douglas, Ramondre Stevenson, Steven Season, Josh Downs, Jackson Smith in Jigba, or Van Jefferson. In full PPR, I was kind of leaning into it a little bit earlier. I'm definitely starting Josh Downs in all leagues, all full PPR leagues, upgrading him into a wide receiver 2, even around wide receiver 22 overall in my projections. I'm not hesitant at all. If he's in a flex play, even better. If you have higher end production above him, that's great. But Josh Downs, rather, is somebody that I have to start. You've just seen every single time that Gardner Minshew is under center, he produces, and he's continuing to produce and to progress linearly, both in his snap share, his opportunity share, his total production, everything of that nature. He is working in tandem with Michael Pittman as the top target earners on the team. There's no question about that. And Josh Downs, for his entire football career, even though undersized, has been a very high-end producer. In my opinion, the reason that Sam Howell was ever even regarded as a first-round pick, obviously falling to the 5th round, I regress. With that said, I'm going to start Josh Downs here for sure, no hesitation. The second of the 2 full PPR gets a little tougher. We have JSN, who has been producing in the past 2 weeks, catching his 2 touchdowns in as many games. DK Metcalf coming back, obviously limiting both his routes, his snaps, and his total targets, but turned one of those targets into a touchdown. You take away that touchdown, and you're back to that very disappointing JSN floor that the rookie has put up throughout the first 8 weeks of the season. I think you have to lean Stevenson, even in the similar situation. But what had Ramondre drafted in the first place was that last half season breakout. The Patriots offense is getting a little bit more productive. They're clicking a little bit more. I think with their wide receiver woes, you can upgrade the tight end targets. You can upgrade the running back targets. I don't necessarily think that the Patriots have any wide receivers on that offense, with Juju, a hurt and old Devontae, a practice squad Kayshon Boutte, and a rookie 7th rounder and Demario Douglas that are going to separate themselves both figuratively and literally in their route tree to earn 8, 9, 10 targets. I think those targets are going to be dissipated down that route tree, and they're going to fall to Ramondre and guys like Hunter Henry. So here, I don't feel great about that second start. Josh Downs, a must-start guy for me, and I'm leaning Ramondre over JSN, who has shown us a pretty low floor sans touchdowns. I have a special guest popping in. We're going to get right to him. My boy, the plug himself, Tim Petrop, hopping in a little late, had some kids he had to run around, but the man is here. I'm happy to have you, bro. Thank you so much for coming today.
Glad to be here, man. I'm sorry for the audio that's coming through these headphones, but didn't have time to get the microphone. I'm coming from the house, as you can see in the background, just coming from soccer practice. And my Rashee Rice call on the podcast this week already paying off. So I'm feeling good about fantasy today already.
Yeah, man. Week 9 is a big week. I'm pumped. It's been a long time since you and I have shared the screen together. We were just hopping through all of these lovely folks in their start sits. I mean, since you're here, you heard me backstage a little bit popping it off, but if you have any other insights as well for Alejandro here, start 2 full PPR, Demario Douglas, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Downs, JSN, Van Jefferson.
Sure. I mean, I think Van Jefferson is a pretty sneaky play today, but I'm not gonna count on that. I actually, in that game, I like Tyler Algier to be the one that sees the most uptick in work due to the missing of Drake London. Knowing that it's Arthur Smith, I think he just doubles down on running the ball. But also, I've been burned by Kyle Pitts so many times this year, where it's just like I know in my heart that he should have he has a better quarterback. He has a great matchup. The other guy who's getting targets is missing, and he should be the number 1 guy. All of that should mean he's going to be good, but who knows? Because a lot of things mean Kyle Pitts is going to be good, and I think that Van Jefferson's kind of in that same boat. While he does play the most snaps, it's just he dropped a big 4th down in last week's game. If you saw that game, he cost them the game. So he's new to the team. I don't think there's a guarantee that he sees the most snaps. But at the same time, if he does, he could pop off for a big one. So I think he's more of a really deep sleeper play. I think there's some guys on this list that you can get a lot more out of. Particularly, I would probably go Stevenson and Downs in this matchup just because JSN has been getting better and better. And I would go let me rephrase that. I would go JSN. What's the news on DK Metcalf right now? Is he expected to play full go?
I mean, it's still questionable. I guess that you can call it game time decision, but he's gotten in limited practices this week and then missed 1 and then another limited. So,
yeah. So it's do you want to count on that? I think Stevenson and Downs. But if Metcalf doesn't play, then I think it would be JSN and Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean,
probably.
I kind of agree with that. If Metcalf is ruled out last minute and you still have the viable pivot to switch up, then I probably would play JSN for that. Yeah. But yeah, I think we're on the same page there. This is a really interesting one from Charles and something I've been debating myself because I do actually think Henderson gets a boost with Rypien under center. But does he get a boost over guys like Rachaad White, Ramondre Stevenson, or even on the flex over guys like Lockett or Zay Flowers, I assume, because Zay Jones being injured? So, I mean, that's really tough. It's really hard for me to draw the line there, especially now that Rachaad is starting to show some of that league-winning upside as a pass catcher that he had in his, collegiate profile, where he's had 7 targets, catching them all for 70 yards in both of the last 2 games. I guess it was 6 for 68 the game before, but still, obviously looking like a real PPR week winner, even though he's struggling as a pure rusher.
For me, the line, he does get a boost, but I think the line is a little lower than those guys. Especially Rachaad White. I feel like you have to. There's very few situations where someone's deep enough at running back to sit Rachaad White at the moment. I feel like Rachaad White is almost guaranteed points. He's getting the ball, and if he pops off for a touchdown, he has a great game. So it's just you know what you're getting out of that. Stevenson's been more up and down, but I still have him. I still like the usage, and I still like I can't quit him just yet.
Especially with you're kind of talking about a similar scenario too, though, with what we were just talking about previously, like Stevenson without Downs, that's their, or Stevenson without Bourne, that's their top target earner, and their second target earner on the team is Ramondre Stevenson. Even though it's been a little bit of a disappointment in comparison to last season's, end of season heights, I like Ramondre a lot. With no Kendrick Bourne there, you're looking at an extra 3 or 4 targets as it trickles down throughout the offense.
Right. And it is an offense that's been playing better for whatever it's worth.
Yeah. Well, much better. I mean, you can't get, like, I think it was something like 13 points in 3 combined games total. So it can't get much worse than that.
Yeah. So I mean, I could see you if you want to play him over Stevenson as the upside play. I could see that. I'm not playing him over Rashad personally. But I would flex him over. I mean, either Zay Flowers or Zay Jones. I'd flex him over Zay Flowers and Zay Jones, and Lockett's closer. But I think I prefer him. Let's go to the. Let's go to the start sit tool and see what the start sit tool.
Let's use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what it says about this.
Oh, you guys are the goats. You the goats.
It's Lockett. What's the matchup again? Lockett and. I'm on the thing.
Darrell Henderson. I think I'm going to lean in a full PPR. I still think I'm leaning Tyler Lockett here.
Let's see, full PPR. Yeah, Tyler Lockett significantly outperforms him. 71% start on the start sit tool. So
I actually thought it would be wider than that. So you're kind of proving a point when even like my hesitation to look it up is Darrell Henderson does deserve to be upgraded this week, even though it seems like it's such a negative matchup. I actually think that he's the winner in that quarterback downgrade.
How do you feel about Puka?
I feel worse about Puka than I do about Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, me too. Would you play Puka? Like, would you play Puka over Romeo Doubs?
Ooh, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Interesting question. I don't know who would ask that.
But then if you said Jaden Reed, I'd say probably no.
No, that's okay. I got
those
Romeo
are the big
Doubs.
play upside, right? Like
I got Puka and I got Dobbs. So that's
but I mean, like, that's kind of that tier is if I had like, Jaden Reed 4 or 5 spots ahead of Romeo Doubs, like that's kind of where that tier is because you're getting that big play upside. I do think that Puka is a must flex player. You can't not, even with a quarterback downgrade, like targets will be earned by that kid.
It's interesting.
So, and he's a yak monster. Like if they do start to reduce his ADOT and actually, don't give those targets to Kupp, which I project, it'll be interesting.
It will be.
So, I mean, that's kind of the line is like, yeah, you're starting Rashad. I think we kind of agree that Ramondre leans a little bit. We're going with Lockett, but then it gets closer. Then it starts to get closer.
So let's see what the Ramondre Henderson. I feel like that's the one that's the closest. See what we got. App leans Ramondre pretty heavily as well.
There we go. Yeah. So I think that you're still starting these guys over him, but it's definitely closer than I think consensus would lean. Hopping into Benjamin Hare. Morning, gents. Morning to you as well, brother. In a deep league slump. I know how those goes. It's half PPR, so we know. 1 tight end of Jonnu or Michael Mayer, and 1 of Mac Hollins or Rashid Shaheed. I fell on my knees watching Rashid Shaheed run crazy on my bench last week. Yeah, and I mean, if you were tuned in a little bit earlier, hopefully you're still tuned in now. But I actually think Rashid Shaheed's a great ceiling play. He had a 26% snap share and 3 targets, turned all 3 of them into 123 yards and a touchdown. But he's still a great ceiling play. Like that is an incredible floor. He's had boomer bust performances all season. As Carr and Olave struggle to have a functional rapport together, Rashid Shaheed seems to be the favorite downfield target. I would absolutely lean Jonnu Smith over Michael Mayer when we, like, for all the reasons that we're saying we like Kyle Pitts, or it should be Kyle Pitts, and an increased quarterback target value, and the top target earner is out. And that makes me think that Arthur Smith is just going to let Jonnu Smith run 99% of the routes.
I hear that. I think let's start. I want to start with Mac Hollins and Rashid Shaheed. I have no desire to start Mac Hollins in any way, shape, or form. And Rashid Shaheed has been good. And, Greg Rosenthal, who's on the Around the NFL podcast, he mentioned something that I thought was a good point. He said that, when you watch the behind the scenes footage and you listen to Carr on the sidelines, every time he's going to the sideline and being like, oh, we got to hit this for a big play. We got to hit this for a big play. It's always to Shaheed. It's not to Olave. And him and Olave have failed to be on the same page. But for all the reasons why we loved Olave in the offseason, Rashid Shaheed has been kind of, if you combine those two guys into one guy, it's been a good season because it's been the Shaheed has just not had the big play. Olave has not had the big play and not had the touchdowns. But Shaheed that's done that, and we love Derek Carr does it. So I think Rashid Shaheed, he's you're playing with fire, obviously, but I'm not playing with Matt Collins at all. I'm gonna go eat soup in honor of not starting Matt Collins. And then Jonnu and Michael Mayer I think that because Michael Mayer, I will say this. People who say that when a coach gets fired, it's a bad thing. That is not the case. When a coach gets fired, that's the best team in the league for the last 10 years. They always step up. And so I see why Michael Myers is a play for you here. But I got to lean Jonnu. Because the same reason that Matt said, because his opportunity share might just be – he might just get 10 targets if Arthur Smith dictates that.
And I will say, that Shaheed also gets the Bears, who might be the easiest defense to take the top off of in the NFL right now.
True. Very true.
We got Alejandro up in here, another one right after the GOAT comment. Much love, brother. Half PPR, start one. Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, or Chuba Hubbard. I think in a vacuum, if we had Kirk Cousins, it would be Addison smash all day. But I genuinely am very concerned about Jaren Hall. I'm more concerned about Jaren Hall in that offense than I am about Brett Ripien or Clayton Tune I just don't think Jaren Hall's a good quarterback whatsoever.
Yeah, Addison I like with Dobbs. That's worth something.
Yes.
But not today. Zay Flowers or Chuba Hubbard is a tough decision, especially when you're sitting Addison. You want to get that right.
Yeah.
Chuba Hubbard's a hard guy to rank. He really is a hard guy.
The Colts. I can't remember who the Ravens played this weekend. That's why I got to look that up.
Chuba is a hard player to rank.
Oh, the Seahawks.
You don't know what his –
Yeah, neither one of those are great matchups.
Yeah, and you don't know what his usage is going to be like because it could change from week to week. So, man, do you count on a guy that you don't know what his – he's been playing after the bye week. He's been playing more before the bye week, even with Miles Sanders back. But Miles Sanders is getting healthier. And – even with 15 carries and 2 targets last week, Chuba failed to really do anything. He did have some opportunities in the red zone that he squandered. So, but Zay Flowers has been kind of the same thing. Zay Flowers has been useless when OBJ is not out and when Mark Andrews is not out and when these guys aren't missing games. Zay hasn't really been earning targets over those guys.
I will say that both players or Zay Flowers is favored over both players in the start sit app by 58.5% on both of them. So Addison and Chuba ranked very closely, obviously.
I think I would
half PPR too doesn't necessarily shy me away from the receiver as much as maybe some other people, but yeah, it's very close. And I think it's Zay Flowers for me here. Everything you said about the Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard's overall efficiency, I think rings true. And also you downgrading a little bit of a matchup against the Colts, who have a good run defense. Right. Zay Flowers against the Seahawks, obviously a good pass defense, but then you expect that the Seahawks are going to be able to score. The Seahawks should be able to put up some points on the Ravens for sure. That should be a closer matchup. I think Zay Flowers has a bit of a positive game script on his side here with a little bit of the better matchup.
All right. All right. I'm down with that.
Word. Charles Kearney and another Henderson question. Would you start him over Hollywood full PPR? No way, right? Yeah, I mean, I might.
I like Clayton Tune,
Yeah.
5th round rookie in his first game. Hollywood, not really like Hollywood, don't get me wrong, excellent receiver, but he's not really like the type to carry a bad quarterback. Like, he didn't really succeed with Lamar's backups when Lamar's backups had to come in. Hollywood with Kyler is a different story. Hollywood with Dobbs, who's been ultra targeting him. I went over on the podcast that Hollywood's been targeted 10 or more times in 4 games and over 7 times in every game but 1. He was being hyper targeted. And we just don't know where Clayton Tune's targets are going.
McBride.
Probably. We've talked about on this podcast how the backup quarterbacks tend to favor their safety blankets. So I would consider it. Yeah, I probably would do it. I probably would make that call and switch.
And I know it's full PPR, but I will say it's 74.5% for Darrell Henderson in half PPR and 64% of it for him in full.
There you go.
So consensus is very down on Hollywood this week with Clayton Tune. I definitely think that you're still probably looking at 6-7 targets, but when those targets are coming half a yard from the line of scrimmage and Hollywood isn't necessarily a yak guy as well. Yeah, this is one actually that's even closer, and I think I'm going to lean Henderson over Hollywood in this one, Charles.
Yeah, I agree.
Good morning, Themi. What's up, boy? Jake from IT, a regular on the Crunch Time Eppies. Morning, boys. Hoping Miami can make this interesting. Yeah, this is legitimately one of Tua's worst performances of his career when his head isn't concussed. He needs to start a running back and a flex. You're looking at Darrell Henderson, Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman, Jake Bobo. Watson would be Christian and Demario Douglas.
Okay.
I would assume Christian because Justin Watson's already playing.
So I will say this. I think that Jerome Ford, I'm a little higher than consensus on Jerome Ford this week. I think that if he played last week.
You're right. And played as well as he did.
Right. And he played. And it's a week later. So I don't know why they wouldn't ramp him up this week. I think they made it very clear when both him and Kareem Hunt were on the squad and healthy that it's Jerome Ford as like the main back in his backfield. And so I think that Jerome Ford is a better play than, people think. Bobo, I'm not going to, Christian Watson, I think is the interesting one here.
Yes.
I would probably, if I'm being safe, I'm going Ford and Henderson. If I need a huge game, then maybe I would go Watson over Henderson. But my inkling usually is like who's going to score me the most fantasy points, and in my opinion, I think that's Henderson and Ford this week.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that one. I do like Jake Bobo just as a fun player. Like generally, he's a fun guy to watch. He's a big body dude. He's hungry for the football. But you're looking at the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth option for the ball on the team if DK Metcalf is healthy, and fifth if not, right? Like they're still going to favor Kenneth Walker. They're still going to go JSN. Like it's still going to be Tyler Lockett. So yeah, I like Jake Bobo as a football player, but he's not somebody that's getting anywhere near my lineups this week. And I completely agree with Tim. It's Henderson and Ford if you're looking for that safety, cruise to a good floor and let your top studs on your roster carry you through the week. If you're already in a hole, you need a blow up game, then I think Watson provides a sneaky high ceiling. Demi's in here with his first question of the day. He said he'd pop in and annoy us. Full PPR bonus for full PPR, bonus for a 40+ yard TD if that matters, He's got a blah one. Keontae Ingram or Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm going Wan'Dale pretty easily here.
Yeah, you think so? Why is that?
I mean, not that the 40-yard TD does matter much, but He's the number one wideout as far as targets are earned. Darren Waller's now on injured reserve. You're looking at a very low depth of target with Daniel Jones anyway. They have nobody to stretch it over the top. Wan'Dale being an incredible, gadget yards after the catch guy, probably can get you that 40-plus TD over Keontae Ingram. Amari DiMercado has had, 4 games without James Conner, or one when James Conner went down, but let's call it 4. One of those games did not lead the backfield in opportunity share. 3 of them led the backfield in opportunity share by more than 75%.
He's out week 9.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah,
I didn't miss that. I missed that.
Yeah, I just saw that this morning. So he's out this week.
Oh, wow. I thought he was. I thought that limited.
Opinion?
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to retrocede a little bit, but still,
does that change?
That makes things a little bit different.
Yeah, I agree. I think Keontae Ingram. I moved him up to RB 37 because I feel like he's a flex play. It's still a terrible matchup. And it's still Clayton Tune in the backfield, so it could be nothing, But Wan'Dale Robinson is another interesting one because I think him and Keontae Ingram are kind of cut from the same cloth. And Wan'Dale Robinson was kind of looking up, and I don't know if I'm trusting a Daniel. Like it's either like, oh my god, it's just the quarterback situation is so terrible around the league right now.
Yeah,
everyone's hurt.
I've never seen this before.
There's a bunch of it's Clayton Tune versus, Daniel Jones and Daniel Jones is by far and away the better of the two. I mean, if you want to go, I think go with your heart. I think for me it would be Keontae Ingram because he has more. We've seen Wan'Dale just basically disappear from games. Las Vegas may play with a renewed vigor because of the situation. I just think there's more uncertainty surrounding Wan'Dale, but I think he has a higher ceiling than Keontae Ingram. So, I mean, it sounds like I'm hedging my bets here. I hate doing that, but it's kind of like
you need to convince me with that look too. I should have been more on top of the injuries as we usually are in crunch time, but I also got right into the questions right away, so I didn't run through the Sports Edge injury list. But yeah, like with that said, I mean, I did think he was gonna or was limited and was going to be able to play this week. I think you're looking at a safer floor with Keontae as well. Yeah, I'll lean that way with you too. Good morning from Mega Brick. Full PPR, sit one. T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Jahan Dotson.
Dotson.
Yeah, me too.
I'm sitting Dotson. I know Higgins has been really disappointing, but I mean look, Joe Burrow was hurt, and you saw last week he had 40 yards rushing, over 40 yards rushing. He was moving around, and he's been moving around, and he's not afraid to move around. And I think it's just, I think this offense is about to explode. Michael thinks it the other way. Michael's like, Higgins has not been part of this resurging offense. And maybe keeping him out of the game plan is more their game plan now that's having more success. I don't see it that way. I see it as Joe Burrow was hurt. He's coming back. The offense is coming back. And there's about to be more and more and more opportunity in this offense for more and more and more people. Last week was Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase. This week, I think T. Higgins comes back and is a good player. And Godwin's been good. Godwin's been great. And I'm not putting, he's been playable. So in terms of who you must play of all these guys, I think Godwin is number one on this list. And then I put Higgins slightly over Dotson. How you feeling about that, Matt?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And T. Higgins was actually somebody that topped my buy low list this week. I do believe that positive regression is coming his way as well. And it's certainly a little bit more of a narrative-based analysis. I'll concede that. But you're looking at a guy that has only played 2 healthy games himself this season, 2 games that are over 65% of the snap share, and both of those games have yielded his best fantasy performances of the year. Who would have thunk it, right? Like the kid does produce when he's healthy, and even in a lower ceiling game last week, you're talking about a wide receiver 34 finish, so a very much a startable player in your wide receiver 3 or your flex spot. Godwin continuing to regress upwards positively. I think you have to start him over Dotson, who is, yes, definitely turned his season around from the disappointments that it was, and certainly the panic that we saw when he was holding kicks in special teams. But again, Curtis Samuel being out probably increases a little bit of that production, but you're still relying on a touchdown with Dotson, which he does have an nose for the end zone for, but I'll give Higgins the slight edge in a matchup against a Buffalo defense that has largely regressed with Tre'Davious White and Matt Milano out of the lineup for the season.
Yeah, Matt Milano is one of those glue guys. He was like the quarterback of that defense, and he was all-pro level.
And I mean, just a game-changing cover linebacker in nickel formation as well.
So hard to replace that.
Yeah. We got Mega Brick in here. Another one. It's start one, Keontae Ingram, Zeke Elliott, or Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman be splitting snaps with the Darrell Henderson look.
Can I take this first? Because I actually think this is not close for me. I think Royce Freeman is the play here. I think that Royce Freeman is shady, a great play this week. Last week, we saw the splits go in Freeman's direction, and Freeman on his carries is averaging over 5 yards a carry, and Darrell Henderson is being Darrell Henderson as Darrell Henderson. He's like it's like 3.4, somewhere around there. I don't have the number right in front of me. Darrell Henderson. He's being Darrell Henderson.
I will only push back to say I'm above consensus on Darrell this week.
I mean, I like Darrell too. I think that this is going to be one of those games where whoever scores a touchdown of these two backs is going to have the great fantasy day, and there might be room for 2 touchdowns from running backs in this game, because I think they're going to lean on the running back so heavily. And it's Sean McVay, so I think that even in the bad weeks last year, Cam Akers was still putting up fantasy performances, and Cooper Kupp was still putting up fantasy performances. Like this Rams offense is just, it's going to move, and they're going to have to move the ball through some guys that are in the backfield because of the quarterback situation. I think there's no way around that. So I think both these guys have start potential, but I think you could be happy with both of them. I have Royce Freeman right now, even before the quarterback change, and I think the quarterback change is an upgrade for him in the running game. I know sometimes I say it's the better offense makes the better player, but I think in this case, like I said, the offense is going to move. And then you got Green Bay as the matchup. And Green Bay as the matchup is like 6th in true matchup ranking against the running back. They've been getting slashed on the ground. So I think it's just going to be like one of those things where Henderson and Royce both have a chance to touch it 12 to 15 times. And if they I'm taking 12 to 15 touches for either of these guys. And I think Keontae Ingram's in a situation where, you can start him. We just talked about him, all the reasons you can start him, but it could be a complete dud. And Zeke is Zeke. You want 7 points? Huh? You want these 7 points?
Yeah.
No, thank you. I don't want them. No, you could have your 7 points.
Yeah, no, I love that breakdown. I'm glad I let you go first, because I completely, I'll fall in line with that full-heartedly. Half PPR flex from Big Will, my boy, Zach Charbonnet or Jamison Crowder. His second Sharp question of the day.
Charbonnet or Jamison Crowder?
No, you.
Charbonnet or Jamison Crowder? This is a tough
Jamison
one.
Crowder, I said it at the top of the hour before you came in, but like legitimately, and I know it's not statistically, but at however years old, had one of the best Jamison Crowder games I've ever seen him play last week. Like he was just balling.
That's a really, really busy position in that offense. I mean, Curtis Samuel was fantasy usable every week.
Yeah, and no Samuel this week, going to be reevaluated and potentially placed on injured reserve from the last that I saw.
Poor guy, New York City kid, man, talented as hell, but just can't.
Dude, I've loved Curtis Samuel his whole career. He was really what I like. Debo before Debo is a common idiom, but he really was like looking to be that guy. He was one of the few dudes, like an old school Percy Harvin even, and then just injuries and incompetent coaching and a trade with more injuries.
Yeah, it's been tough for him. A 30-second aside real quick. Speaking of the PSAL, my brother took over Infotech High School. They had not won a game in like 2 years. Now they're 5-2 in the playoffs. Let's go Infotech. Let's go Infotech.
Let's go. That's fire. That's awesome, man.
Johnny, head coach, killing it out there. But let's see. I think I'm gonna go Crowder in this matchup. I think Charbonnet, the question is, did Charbonnet get the increased workload last week because this is becoming a split backfield, or did he get it because there was an injury to Ken Walker? You could look at the numbers either way, and you can make a and you can make a argument for both. Like there's no real answer in my opinion. So I think I'm going to go with Jamison Crowder. It's been a very busy position, and the Commanders just lost their 2 pass rushers, both of them.
The two best defensive players, even other than Cameron Curl, but yeah.
One of them was like 5th in the league in QB pressures, and Chase Young. Like it's you're not gonna be able to bounce back from that without giving up more points, and more points means more passing, and more passing means more JMO.
Yeah, I kind of am going to lean JMO here as well. And I answered it a bit with one of Big Will's previous questions, but I do still think, like, as we saw, and Ken will play, like he is playing this week. Like, Charbonnet really does need an injury to lead to that increased usage. I absolutely think the efficiency there is there for him to be a quote unquote league winning asset if he had the backfield to himself. But until that happens, you see how the Seahawks want to run that team. And it's certainly not through Charbonnet for anything more than a change of pace.
Yep.
Much love, Themi. We're going to win. We're going to win always. Coming back at you, boys. Benjamin Hare, half PPR, 2 of Dotson, Ford, Brandon Cooks, Zach Moss, Chuba, Singletary. Half PPR, starting 2 of them.
Oh, boy. What do you think, Matt?
I think, man, I'm like, it's honestly legitimately really, really difficult to bench Zach Moss, as crazy as that is.
So hard. It doesn't make any sense.
What are we? And I keep expecting the opportunity share just to fall out. And like, I think it won't because of their quote unquote, like losing season. Like they don't have anything to win to play for. Why give Jonathan Taylor 340 touches? You just signed him to a $50 million contract. And I would always say follow the money, but next season is their season. Like they paid Jonathan Taylor that money because of how they felt about Anthony Richardson. And then 4 hours after he inked that contract, Anthony Richardson blew his shoulder apart and was placed on IR. So I can't bench Zach Moss. We even had a little bit of a narrative, but we even had Shane Steichen. Like there was a reporter that was like, do you think that if you didn't have Zach Moss, like Jonathan Taylor could really become that guy in the offense? And Steichen was essentially like, yeah, like if I didn't have a horse like Zach Moss, I'd give him 20 touches a game. Like he called Zach Moss the horse. So I can't bench him. He's putting up all of the production. The usage is still split, and it's probably going to continue to be split. Like sometimes you don't need to read between the lines.
It's a fast offense too. Like Shady, the Colts have hit the over every single game this year. It's just been phenomenal to play.
The only team in the league to have scored more than 30 points on the Browns.
And they play fast. It's entertaining watching them play. I think I agree with you with Zach Moss.
So the second one is a little more difficult because I think we're like, it's between, I'm okay benching Cooks and Singletary here, especially with these other options on the board. Yeah. So it's like Chuba, Ford, Dotson.
For me, it's Ford. I mean,
I think so too.
I mentioned earlier in the show why I like Ford. I just think that he's in for an increased workload because he's healthier than last week. I don't see this being a kind of split.
I do like Jahan Dotson. I mean, just overall, the dynasty guy, obviously have to bring it up. Like, I think Jahan Dotson's range of outcomes has not dipped below, a must-have, must-roster dynasty kind of cornerstone, so to speak. He's going to be your wide receiver 3 on your offense for years, putting up, 12, 14 points per game a season. But with that said, I'm kind of agreeing with Tim. It's a slight edge with Ford. We saw him get good work last week in a game that he was supposed to be out for the next 3 weeks in. He's not on the injury report anymore. Well, he is, but limited practices, obviously practicing, going to be playing. I think Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong are decent enough change-up options, but if they're not going to outwork him in a game that he wasn't supposed to be playing in, they're not going to outwork him in games when he has increased health.
So what do you think? Do you think we're going to go Ford Moss?
Ford and Moss with, if your heart's telling you Dotson, lean Dotson. But Zach Moss, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, is the must-start player here.
I think Ford and Moss is where I'd go here.
Yeah. Yep. I agree there.
Although Singletary, there's some. Sorry, those are some good options,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Those are like, and I assume it's kind of, you're looking at a flex with the wide receiver and running back mix here. So those are good flex options. I have Cooper Kupp, Dominique says, and Puka, but I'm not confident in both this week. Is it worth starting Jacoby Myers or Dalton Kincaid over them? And he means over Puka, I should say, with Kupp being the guy that he's thinking as a must start. Or if we could get crazy, bench them both for Jacoby and Dalton Kincaid.
No. For me, man, like I'm starting Kupp, but it's difficult for me to start Puka with full confidence in this game. And then Jacoby Myers with Aiden O'Connell after I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. The choice is between Puka and Kincaid is in a phenomenal matchup. By the way, let me get
the best matchup.
Yeah, so Kincaid is let's see I'm trying to pull up the true target, the true matchup rankings. So you could really
I think the Bengals are first for tight ends.
Yeah, they're first, but I think it's like
that's what I mean. He's in the best possible matchup.
Specifically, like 125% over average points scored. Like this is not the most predicted pool for tight ends, and this is what. And he's the number 2 offense the number 2 option in the offense right now. When Gabe Davis is still, but still, it seems as though.
Well, I mean, Gabe Davis has not been for the past 2 weeks, and you're looking at 2 top 5 tight end finishes from Kincaid back to back. Like this is what we thought he would be, and it sucks that it did take Dawson Knox getting out of the lineup for him to see more of the tight end snaps rather than just playing from the slot with minimal production. But yeah, I mean, they're running more 11 personnel than ever before. They obviously don't have another tight end that they're going to put out there for 2 tight end sets, which they were loving to do with Knox in the lineup. I mean, you're looking at increased targets, the best possible matchup for any tight end this week. Half PPR as well, actually, is where I get a little bit afraid of those true wide receivers in these quarterback downgrades, because you're obviously anticipating a much lower yardage total. Even though they're going to earn those targets, the lower value of target comes in the lower ADOT, the inaccuracy, of course, as well. But a lot of those lower ADOTs aren't going to lead to, a 65 and above yardage total. You're going to get 6 receptions for 49. And in a half PPR, that's where that downgrade is obviously not as strong as a PPR format, where those low dot receptions are still worth gold. So I think Kincaid over Puka rather is actually a smart play here.
Yeah, I think I'd go with that, especially considering that I'm starting Kupp.
Yeah, and we're getting close to the end of the hour. We got about 4 minutes left. I see you guys still got some questions coming in. You know the Crunch Time guarantee. If you're a regular, if not first time tuning in, we answer everything. It doesn't matter if it's past the recording hour. We're going to answer all your questions. We got a few more coming in. Benjamin Hare back with one more. Oh, not necessarily a question, actually, just a comment. Love Zach Moss as a JT owner. It just feels wrong starting both running backs. I feel that. Like,
Does that change something for you?
No. I would actually like it more that I have them both, because then you're covering you. It seems kind of antithesis. It's like if you have 11 guys, it's like you're starting 10. Like I kind of get it, but you're starting an RB1 guaranteed. Like those 2 guys combined are going to finish as the RB1 overall, right? So that's like you're guaranteeing that 25 points. It's who's getting 15, who's getting 10, who's getting 7, who's getting 18. But in that position where they have both been producing well above RB24 point per game averages, you start them both.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't change my mind either, especially with the other option.
This might be the last one before we got any more, but I'll do all the shout outs and give all the love. We got Steve Breaky in here with his last one. Mac Jones, Daniel Jones, Bryce Young, or Gardner Minshew this week as a starter. I had this exact, minus the Daniel Jones, but it came to Gardner Minshew or Mac Jones after Stafford was, truly questionable game time decision, likely not playing. Obviously, we've gone with the Brett Ripien narrative the whole time. I put Gardner Minshew in over Mac Jones.
Me too. I think I lean Gardner. I lean Daniel Jones over Mac Jones. But Gardner's been a slanger. He's put up the points. The rest of these guys haven't. Daniel Jones has had one good half. I don't hate the play, but I think Gardner Minshew is the better play.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, and again, like Minshew's kind of in a position where, like Bryce, he's playing Bryce Young. He's in a position where the game script isn't necessarily lending to a lot of pass attempts. But as you mentioned, it seems like the Colts actually are passing more and playing at a higher pace than they were with Anthony Richardson, which is again like kind of funny to see. But I mean, Minshew's always been a serviceable fantasy quarterback. He's never finishing outside of the top 24. I know that 2 QB leagues are more rare in redraft, but it's still those are serviceable numbers. You're talking 12 to 14 points per game. That's a great floor to have in that QB2 spot, or that QB1 spot rather. And yeah, you obviously can get any narrative to lean you towards a QB1 finish for Gardner Minshew, especially with the pace that this offense has had. Everybody healthy again.
It's really about Gardner. It's like, is it going to be Moss and JT with the touchdowns, or is it going to be him with the touchdowns? And that's really the difference between a good Gardner game and a bad one. The yards are coming. The attempts are coming. He's not going to rush for a lot of yards, but he'll put a point or two for you in that category.
He'll give you 20.
Last week he rushed in a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. So, has the ability to do that. I think I'm definitely going with Gardner here.
Yeah, and as much as I love Bryce Young as a dynasty asset, it's still one of those positions that until they have someone beside Thielen, and obviously, eventually Thielen's not going to click either. He is 33, so until they have someone beside Thielen, it's just like he's showing it all. Bryce Young looks phenomenal on film. It's just there's nothing after the catch. There's no separation. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I'm holding off judgment. He's in a bad situation. Can I just say one thing before we go? Can I just say one? Just don't play Quentin Johnson. Don't play Quentin Johnson. That's my only thing that I could tell you. Don't do it. Don't do it. The guy that you're looking for when you put Quentin Johnson on your team, the guy that you're looking for is Gerald Everett. All right, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for Gerald Everett, but. No, this guy is going to be facing Sauce, and he's going to be facing DJ Reed, and they're going to be all over him because he can't get open against mediocre players. He's not going to get open against two of the best in the league. All right? It's just not going to happen. And guess who's been getting open? Tight ends. Okay? So a lot of people with the Quentin Johnston stuff, Quentin Johnston, no, never. And I could be eating my words at this time tomorrow, but no.
I think Tim's also doing this because in the Heat Wave podcast, I was saying Quentin Johnson over Mike Williams would be not as rare as people think. But anyway, how do you feel about Terry McLaurin this week? The last one from Dominique before we hop out. I feel pretty good. I mean, it's honestly like I do feel pretty good about Terry McLaurin. He's going to continue to see it, and those trickle down targets, and it's probably only 5 or 6 a game, sure, with the Curtis Samuel absence, but it's not necessarily like vacated targets. They just trickle throughout the offense, and Terry McLaurin is the best option to earn the majority of those trickle down targets. He is the number 1 wide receiver on that offense. Even with Jahan Dotson's a little bit of an uptick, it's still Terry McLaurin out targeting him. Just a big play led to a touchdown, and Jahan finished ahead of him. I think you feel good about Terry McLaurin in almost any matchup. He's proven it, and Sam Howell is a top 12 fantasy quarterback. As much as I hate that guy, I eat my words every day watching him go out there and take 6 sacks and still put up and throw 2 interceptions and still put up 30 fantasy points.
Big facts. I like McLaurin a lot. I think he gets an upgrade with the defensive sell-off as well. I think it's
I mean, the offense is only going to move faster and have to play from behind more often. Completely agree.
This is arguably Sam Howell's most important 9-game stretch of his entire career, because 100%. I think it's very, very apparent that it's the end of days for Ron Rivera, and this team is going to be moving in a different direction. And if that direction includes Sam Howell or not is going to depend on what happens in
100%. And I mean, fifth round quarterback, we know about job insulation, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast in the past with me as the dynasty eye. But yeah, like there is no job insulation for Sam Howell with a new coaching staff, with increased draft capital, with a team that is clearly rebuilding. I mean, they sold away 2 guys that were in contract years that are staples of their team.
And that they spent high draft capital on.
High draft capital on both of them, yeah. So, yeah. With that said, we are out of here. 103, 203, wherever you're East Coast, West Coast, Atlantic.
1203, baby.
Much love, much respect. You know where to find us at BroToFantasy, BroToFantasy.com. Go to patreon.com/BroToFantasy so you can get up in the Discord, get some of these questions in a little bit early on the mailbag so you don't have to stress out on Sunday, but please still come and visit me and hang out. On Twitter at Brodo, I already said, but I'm at PsychWardFF. He's at Tim
Broto FF Tim.
At Broto FF Tim. I knew it. Yeah, all love in here, man. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Let's go Jets.